Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Indo Politics from the Irish Independent. I'm Tabitha Monahan. The controversy over SNA allocations continued this week, with the government announcing late-night reversals and additional funding to fix the problem, albeit just for this year. And we're getting a much clearer picture of how the upcoming by-elections are going to pan out, with Sinn Féin hoping Janice Boylan will be the candidate to secure them a second seat in Mary Lou McDonald's constituency of Dublin Central. To discuss all this, I'm joined by Fionnán Sheahan. Fionnán, as I said in the intro, the SNA Allocation Controversy followed the government into this week again. Can you give me an assessment of how you felt the government handled this controversy?
It was all a mere communications, little bit of a problem, and the Minister of Education has come to the rescue and secured 19 million. I mean, that's her spin.
Yeah.
The other side of it, you would look at this and go, okay, the education sector is what you'd call a heavily stakeholdered sector of public provision, where there's a lot of consultation and interaction with a whole range of different bodies and unions and people who own different pieces of it. It doesn't tend to be the kind of department where, unlike health and justice, things drop out of the sky. Mm-hmm. Crises emerge from nowhere because you can have one specific case kicks off a whole crisis. So in this case, you're looking at it going, okay, so this was an arm of the Department of Education, because most of all, as they might talk about the National Council for Special Education being an independent body, it's not. It's really just an agency of the Department of Education, going about a review, which they're mandated to do by the Department of Education, which writes up its policies, which appoints its board, which funds it. And going about it in the way in which the policy in the Department of Education has directed them, and communicating the review after it was conducted, the results going back to the respective schools, and largely speaking, working off a set of principles that are about a decade old.
2014 circular.
2014 circular. So what's happened in the intervening period? Well, there's been a lot of changes in the education sector, probably greater awareness now of special education needs, higher population, more demands for services, hence the number of SNAs has gone up quite substantially. So in effect, what was being attempted here was a bit of a rebalancing, because there's going to be more SNAs in the system. So they were looking to claw back some, to apply the criteria that would probably haven't been in recent years. And yet we had the ministers in the Department of Education going, oh, well, this was the NCSE, nothing to do with us, but it was poor communication on their part. If it was poor communication on the anonymous state agency's part, well, then you'd look at the two ministers, Hildegard Naughton, the senior minister, Michael Moynihan, the junior minister, and go, if it was a controversy, lads, ye turned it into an all-out crisis.
Yeah.
Because despite the fact, I'm often amazed by this, we get a thing called the GIS list, the Government Information Service list, which lists off all the press officers in every department. And some are lifetime civil servants, some are political advisors that are brought in. But across the board, there's about 40, 50 odd of them on various different levels. And yet 2 ministers were put out last week who didn't have a bull's notion, and who had certainly didn't have a bull's notion about communicating with the public at large, or the people who were concerned in this case. So what did Hildegard Naughton do? She doubled down on the review that had been conducted by an arm of her department, explained that it was going ahead, and that people, if they didn't like the outcome, could appeal to her department, which applied the criteria which her department had set down and devised. It made utterly no sense. So she caused chaos there, because you were now undermining the entire system, because you had the minister telling any school in the country, 194 of them, that were going to be reduced in terms of their numbers, appeal the decision. So obviously that gave people a mandate, so that was going to create a difficulty. You then had Michael Moynihan coming out again defending it, saying that the process had been paused. He said that 12 times in total yes. during one interview in Morning Ireland. That's about all he had to say. So you could see coming into the weekend that the government announcing that the process had been paused, which meant the review was being reviewed, that wasn't going to wash. And ultimately, because the two ministers had not politically sorted out the problem, it became a bigger problem over the course of the weekend. So, in a scenario like that, Taoiseach and Taoiseach are going to step in and go, lads, what are we fighting over here?
Yeah.
How much is this costing? 20 million. Why are we losing so much political capital for the sake of 20 million? Just reverse it, come back, say you're going to review the review of the review, have a look at the whole system and structure, and revert again next year, allocate 19 million, ring up Jack Chambers there and get another 20 million to throw into the Department of Education or find it somewhere else and move on. But that hasn't washed, and they have done enormous damage now within what Michael Moynihan called the system, which is schools, parents, SNAs, teachers not understanding what criteria were being applied here, how they were rising at this decision, and has basically panicked a whole load of parents now, because every school is now looking at it going, aha, they were stopped this year, but they're going to be back next year. And I'm not even sure they are going to be back next year, because they're going to encounter the same problem again, because we saw a pretty comprehensive U-turn here, and largely speaking, the department and the ministers at hand were largely speaking responsible for it, much and all as they may want to blame the anonymous coin go down the road.
Yeah, it is interesting what will happen next year, because it does seem to me that the government are still backing this redeployment scheme of the SNAs, that yes, we need to examine whether or not, and it's the same with teachers. Teachers are reallocated if the school doesn't need the certain number of teachers that they have, and for SNAs it's the same thing. I think part of this problem for the government as well was that they have been banging the drum on improving disability service, improving special education since they took over in January of last year. There's a disability unit in the Department of An Taoiseach. So Micheál Martin has made it his thing for this Dáil term that he is going to improve special education, that he wants to see disability. And I think that became a particularly sensitive issue because of that there's all of these promises that we're going to see the number of SNAs increase, the number of special schools, the number of special classes. And this just seemed to completely fly in the face in what the government have been promising.
But also the lack of joined up thinking. So what Micheál Martin is talking about is that the different elements of the system need to be working together, and the way it's which it's configured at the moment doesn't necessarily work. The therapies have been taken out of schools.
Yes.
Where are the kids 5 days a week? Who are the people who best know what sort of assistance they need? Well, the schools. They're the ones with the expertise on how an individual child is performing and what help they need. Instead, the therapies have been removed from that. So what he has been talking about in recent years, with other colleagues in the cabinet who have been agreeing with him, we need to get the provision of therapies back in working with the schools. So they're not an entirely separate system. Working separately. So you need to have that level of joined up thinking where you get assessment, therapy, educational requirements, that there is that link up between primary care requirements and educational requirements, that they're working off the same hymn sheet. And what we were seeing here was a scenario where parents were being told, oh yeah, well, your child may be functioning, your child may be getting on very well at school level, but now we're going to disrupt that and we're going to throw you back into a system that still isn't configured correctly. So if this had been part of an overall approach, where there was an overall plan and going, this is what we intend to do with the special education needs system for the next 5 years, for the next generation, this is the direction in which we need to go, then I think there would have been a level of possibly acceptability. There would still be pushback, but it would be, no, this is part of an overall plan. It's to level the playing pitch. It's to take account of the different demographic requirements, the different advancements in the terms of educational provision, and also the demographic changes that have been happening and the demand for these services. Instead, you just had one part of the system acting completely independently, and that's what I think what upset the apple cart here. You were removing a service from children without any political proofing of this whatsoever. And again, I do not accept that two fairly experienced ministers now at this stage, I'd have to say, they're around a good while, can just turn around and go, oh, we didn't know what was going on because the agency down the road was doing that. That's your job, as Roy Keane would say.
Part of the argument was that, OK, we knew that the review was happening. Obviously, that had been initiated some time ago, and this is what the Taoiseach was saying. And then I think Ivana Bacik was in the Dáil during Leaders' Questions, possibly on Tuesday, saying this got government sign-off. And again, Taoiseach pushing back on that, saying, no, this didn't. The impact, we didn't know what the impact would be on this review. That didn't get government sign-off. Is there a certain argument there that maybe the NCSE, or there should have been somebody should have just picked up the phone and say, hey, we've done this review now.
Who appoints the NCSE again?
Exactly. Yes. No.
Who appoints the board of the NCSE?
Yeah.
The Department of Education's website points out the NCSE is in charge of the provision of these services, but the policy is set by the department. The board is appointed by them. They're funded, and their policies are applied. They are simply ones who are implementing them. So if there is a problem there, well, then that's the Department of Education, the Minister for Education's job. If they're not politically tuned in enough to know
that this is
that
happening,
a review of SNAs is going on, and that's a sensitive issue, well, then go get another job, because you've no place in politics if you don't understand that something like that is going to cause a problem.
They also have a job in their hands now to get 500 SNAs into the system by September. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the problem, is that the reallocation was going to help with that demand. And because it has been so badly handled, they've basically undermined the entire system now. It's almost said, oh, we don't really trust how the system operates. They've damaged relationships with schools, with SNAs, with teachers, with parents right across the country, because many parents will be looking at this now going, okay, could that be my child next year? Could that be our school next year? And it is, you've seen in recent years the growth, not just in terms of SNA provision, but also communities across the country accepting that their school, maybe for the first time, needs to have a special class for kids with special education needs. You're seeing that in terms of the rollout of the capital programme from the Department of Education, which is announced on an annual or biannual basis. The number of capital projects or smaller projects that are basically associated with providing the special class inside the school has gone up quite substantially. So, yeah, it's quite the setback, as you say, in terms of a government that was saying one of our priorities is to solve this issue, to approach it in a more, round table view type of thinking, one that is more child focused.
Yeah, child centred. Yeah.
At the very start, they have basically undermined all faith in them. Rocky start for our new Minister for Education, who was already coming. And by the way, no apology from her. I listened carefully to what she was been saying.
We did get an apology from the SecGen of the department at the Public Accounts Committee today. When
last I checked, people elected the minister, and the minister is the one who went up to Horace Nuchtruan and got the seal of office. She's already come in for criticism over the rollout of the school building programme, which again, that's a politically sensitive issue.
Very.
I didn't seem to handle that with any great deftness or skill. Certainly not by putting out a list where she was boasting about the number of projects that were delivered in her own county, when other TDs were going, but I've got nothing in my constituency.
And literally nothing.
To report back to people. So education has now gone up in terms of that kind of danger zone of places where there could become crises, fires can break out over the next couple of years. Education is now well up there.
Something the government has also been very big on since it took over, particularly from a public expenditure point of view, is curbing in-year spending, that if departments go over budget, it'll be taken out of their budget for the following year, that we need to really crack down on this. 19 million euro almost overnight was found. What do you think that says about the government in terms of how they allocate money, in terms of how they budget? Because again, that was something that was brought up at the Public Accounts Committee on Thursday. Where is this money coming from? And according to the representative from the Department of Public Expenditure, it was, well, that's still being negotiated. So we don't actually know where exactly this money is coming from.
It shouldn't really be a big deal. I mean, I recall Jack Chambers in the budget announcing a spare billion.
Yes, a contingency fund, yes.
Just said, I've never seen that before. In a budget, £1 billion just left sitting there going, and it crops up, you can dip in.
Part of that was going to be going towards the EU presidency.
Yeah, it was particularly for the EU presidency. But in general, it was just saying to every sector in across every department, yeah, look, if you need extra money at some point, there's the little kitty there. The spare change bowl is there. Go to that. So it can come out of that, or it can be provided as a supplementary estimate. They're going to have to show, though, that because they've made such a hames of it, that this money is actually coming from somewhere that isn't being taken from some other area within the Department of Education. And that can all be tracked, because a body like the Public Accounts Committee, a set of estimates will have to be produced. We'll be watching, for example, end of March and end of June, end of September, we get the quarterly returns. You can map it over the course of the year. Where exactly has that money come from? Where is there a shortfall elsewhere if their provision is not being increased elsewhere? Education, by the way, was one of the offenders in recent years, particularly last year,
for overspending.
Overspend.
Yes.
So there'll be another bit of that there. Also, they have had pressures. To be fair, the arrival of so many Ukrainian children, they needed to provide language provision and additional teaching there. Also, the demands of, as we've just been discussing, on the special needs end meant that there was more pressure upon their budget. So again, the budget lines of the Department of Education will be watched quite closely now for the remainder of the year, particularly kicking into next year, when this money will be required for the new academic year.
Yeah, I want to move on. I want to go and speak about the by-elections. So we now know who the Sinn Féin candidate is, who is Janice Boylan. She did run in the general election last year. She was Mary Lou McDonald's running mate, but she really didn't do very well in the last election. So she got 1,257 first preference votes and was excluded after the second count, and then her votes were redistributed. I mean, not at the races at all.
Yeah, she was well down, because, of course, Dublin Central was the most scrutinised county in our country as a result of Jerry the Monk Hutch.
And will probably
coming
be again.
So close, yeah. So we not only were we watching that on the day, but since then you've been going back and looking at transfer patterns and so on. I know Janice Boylan didn't come anywhere near getting elected. Now, fine, you can argue, had she been the running mate 5 years earlier,
that would have been a different
on
thing.
The back of the Shinner Surge or the Mary Lou Loop, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of that bounce that Sinn Féin got, where they got the largest number of votes in the country. She would have been a TD. She would have been one of those between 9 and 12 Sinn Féin representatives who would have got back in off the back of that. So she gets her run this time when it's not as good a day for Sinn Féin. Mary Lou tops the poll, but not, she didn't get elected.
Not as much.
I don't think she got elected on the first count this time. And Janice Boylan wasn't at the races. There was, in the run-up to that general election in 2024, Sinn Féin hadn't yet picked the candidate. There was talk about whether Janice Boylan would be the candidate. There was some talk about rifts within the organisation. There were cryptic messages being put out by Janice Boylan in the run up to Mary Lou's running mate being picked. There was talk of a walk down Dollymount Strand where Mary Lou and herself came back and were resolved. But
people remember the selfie that was posted.
Yeah. The great Republican cause was being pursued again.
So friends.
So geographically, she makes perfect sense. She's a councillor in the North Inner City. Mary Lou is in Cabra in the burbs, as such, of Dublin Central. But no, she wasn't coming anywhere near getting elected. And Jerry Hutch showed that there was a significant vote within the North Inner City to be harnessed.
Yeah. Gillian Sherratt, obviously, that was who Janice Boylan was up against. So I think the Sinn Féin local membership, they chose loyalty and they chose the person that they know. And Janice Boylan has been a councillor for a number of years now. They stuck with that. So what do you think this does for how this plays out now in Dublin Central?
Yeah, Gillian Sherratt cannot have been an accidental entrant into that contest to become the party candidate. She's the mother of Harry Morrison Sherratt, so she's obviously a campaigner on a high-profile issue of children with scoliosis.
And Sinn Féin very much led on that. I mean,
they have been raising that issue quite comprehensively and repeatedly for quite some time, going back several years. Very much resonates in terms of Simon Harris's infamous, I won't say famous, or literally infamous pledge about being to deliver scoliosis treatment far more quickly, if anything, that potentially made things worse. So Gillian Sherratt comes along, her name is floated out there, but the two local councillors, Seamus McGrattan and Janice Boylan, don't, Seamus did, but Janice didn't get off the pitch. So you'd imagine how that would have played out was a bit like the Jim Gavin, Billy Keller scenario.
Yes. A
candidate is being brought in by the party leadership. It's dropping a subtle hint to others there. This is who we want.
Yes.
So you step aside now. Janice Boylan said no, and went for it and won a convention. So what Gillian Sherratt, I suppose, represented was she was going to be a candidate running in, yes, a local constituency by-election, but she was going to represent far more than that in terms of what she was campaigning on, in terms of health service provision and highlighting where government failures. So you now don't have that. You don't have a kind of a national dimension to your candidate as a result. You've got Janice Boylan, who didn't figure particularly well in the general election, and doesn't really have a national selling point either. The thing to remember about a by-election is that it's not just a local constituency election. It is very much a national election, particularly when you've got two of them running together. So who Sinn Féin's candidate in Dublin Central, because it'll be more high profile than Galway West, let's face it, as a result of the lineup, they're going to be the flag bearer for the party come May.
We don't know yet who Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil's candidates are going to be. We know Jerry the Monk Hutch is going to be running in it. He actually did release a video during the week, which I thought, again, he did what he did the last time, was encouraging people to get on the register, which really is the first step for somebody like him, is to try and actually get the voters the ability to vote for him in the first place. That I think it's an interesting and probably a smart strategy on his part.
And it's he's not really saying anything that anybody can object to.
No.
He's saying people, it's your say. If you don't get out and vote, you don't have a say.
Yeah, do this for your children, for your grandchildren.
He is let's face it, Dublin Central is a constituency that does traditionally have a very low turnout. It's again is typical of the working classes areas in Dublin. The vote is lower than it is in middle class areas. Simple as that. So what we saw with him in the general election was that he did manage to mobilise a vote. He did run something of a registration drive that time. Bit late, probably coming to it. This time, this is phase one of his campaign. Is he wants people to get engaged by getting on the register. Then you have a better chance of getting them to come out and vote for you. So it is a bit more of a textbook political campaign this time. At the same time, he's not talking about his views, his policies.
Well, he said he was going to do the same that he did the last time.
Yeah, which is kind of avoid all that. But nonetheless, he doesn't lack voter recognition, which is a big part of politics in the first place. You'd still have to say advantage left in terms of, and I'm not including Jerry Hutch in that, I'm including left-wing parties.
Social Democrats, Sinn Féin.
Social Democrats, Sinn Féin, Labour, the Green Party, People Before Profit. You'd have to say whoever emerges from that pot of candidates on top will most likely go on and win that by-election. So you could see the attraction for Sinn Féin was not just in terms of mobilising its own voter base, which is considerable, it being the party leader's constituency, but they were also looking at who's going to appeal beyond our own party to other people on the left, soft left and hard left. And someone who was a health campaigner like Gillian Sherratt had that attraction. I'm not quite clear that Janice Boylan does have that same attraction to transfers from the left. So if there will be most likely will be a lot of talk of vote left, stay left. Yeah. So you can still see the seat is going to stay there. Sinn Féin still have got a strong chance, because ultimately, if they can get out the first preferences, then fair enough. But I think it's less certain now than it was probably 24 hours ago when we thought Gillian Sherratt was going to be the candidate.
Do you think this is now Fine Gael set to lose a seat that they've held for a long time?
It's difficult territory for Fine Gael. They might do well in the burbs, like Drumcondra, the tip at Glasnevin that is in the constituency, over towards Cabra. But come the North Inner City, not great stomping ground really for Fine Gael, you'd have to say. Pascal Donoghue never really had a spectacular vote there. Like, you have had big names from the party over the years going back. Jim Mitchell, I think Alice Glenn was in that constituency as well. So there is a Fine Gael vote there, but winning a by-election, that's a big ask. They'll probably have Ray McAdam. He's the Lord Mayor. He's Pascal's sidekick, so he'll have that infrastructure and that name recognition behind him. So he should have, he'll have a good hop off it. But it's a big ask for them. I mean, if they couldn't even win Dublin Bay South 5 years ago, Dublin Central is a very, very different dynamic.
We also saw that there was a significant proportion of spoiled votes in the Dublin Central constituency during the presidential election. Would you imagine that those voters would potentially vote for Jerry Hutch, maybe Malachy Steenson?
Yeah, it is the sort of place that you can stir up disaffection basically, because there are still large areas of deprivation, problems with crime and drugs, and people living in the communities feel that they haven't really got a fair share, that they often end up as a kind of a place that other parts of the city don't want end up inside in the city centre. So as a result of that, you do get a lot of people as a result who say, listen, we're forgotten about by the political establishment, so why should we participate in your whatever show you're putting on at that particular time.
And I think that's where we'll leave things, Fionnán, for this week. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for listening and watching Indo Politics. As always, you can find our latest episodes on the Irish Independent's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.